the real sounds of Africa to once again kick off the World Football Phone-In. So we're talking football in Asia and in South America this morning, as Asia, or people in Asia and the Asian countries, take part in the Asian Cup. We've got our own Northern Soul, Johnny Duerden, for us. Where are you this morning, Johnny?
Good morning, Doctor. I'm in Dubai. It's a rest day today.
And that's the place to be. That is the place to be for this Asia Cup, isn't it?
Yeah.
That's where it's taking place.
Yeah, sure.
And the Legendino, he's just off in some place called Rio as usual, taking care of any South American questions you might have. Second fiddle tonight, mate. Tim Vickery?
Yeah, and very happy to be. I'm going to sit back. I've got some nice water with some ice to help me through the summer heat, and I'm going to listen to Johnny Duerden tell me all about the Asian tournament. Not only for reasons of the Asian tournament, but also because for two reasons that I'm going to extract like
I
a
thought you were
surgically
playing
removed
second
teeth.
fiddle. Now you're extracting
I am.
teeth.
Let me get this out of the way quickly. Firstly, because there is a chance that Colombia will appoint Carlos Queiroz, current coach of Iran, as their coach. So I'm looking forward to Johnny D's answer on that. And secondly, because the main thing about this Asian Cup that Johnny's there covering for is that from the point of, I imagine from the point of Japan and Qatar, it's a warm-up for the Copa America. They are playing in the Copa America, South America's competition, the 10 countries of South America, plus, bizarrely enough from a geographical point of view, Japan and Qatar. The draw will be next Thursday. So Johnny D's going to tell me all about these things, and I'm now going to sit down, shut up, and listen to him do so.
I saw what you did there. You agreed to play second fiddle, and then you threw your lasso around Asia and drew it towards South America. I get it. Well done to you for that. And incidentally, Sean in Cumbria.
It's only taken me 21 years to learn how to do it. You know?
Only took you about a minute on this programme to show us how to do it. So Sean in Cumbria has texted us on 85058 and said, I'm depressed about the whole Brexit goings on, so please feel free to be as funny as you like on the World Football Phone-In tonight. Well, I'm never funny, so I'll leave it to the other two. And also, Derek.
Clown over here. I amuse you. I'm a funny guy.
Derek has said, please get the FA Cup traumatised Geordie fellow back on for 20 minutes. That was from 2 weeks ago. He said, it's been a long day and I need a laugh. So feel free to join us again. 08085 909 693 is the number to call. 08085 909 693. I do want to talk about coaches in a moment or two. So actually, you preempted a conversation that I'm sure that we're going to continue. And one of our listeners already suggested that Marcelo Bielsa's tactics are interesting, to say the least, and he's continued to comment on his Spygate story. But Gav, first of all, this is the first text asking a question today. Gav says, Johnny, any way that the Asian Cup can be suspended until Harry Kane recovers? Apparently they need Son back in N17.
Well, also the Asian Cup also needs Son because he's a bigger star. And when he arrived, he missed the first two games to play for Tottenham. When he arrived, I think last Monday, there was lots of excitement, and he's by far the biggest star in the tournament. So I think we need him, and Korea needs him too. I mean, when he came, there was a bit of a surprise because, of course, he played against Manchester United last Sunday. He arrived on Monday. Korea played China on Wednesday. Again, they didn't have to win. They're already through. And most people thought Son would be on the bench and maybe come on the last 10, 15 minutes. But he started, and he played quite well. It was Korea's best performance of the tournament, 1-2-0 easily. So, yeah, Son is definitely needed. So in that case, maybe you need to support Bahrain because Korea played Bahrain in the second round match. And if Bahrain can pull off the shot, then Korea's coming home early. But I would expect Korea to win. And Son is the big star, and I think Asia needs him as much as Tottenham do, unfortunately.
I did see that match. I did see, for those who've been following the Asian Cup as well, I mean, he played a blinder, but what I was surprised about in that match is him being, like you say, the star of the tournament. He manages to get a penalty and he doesn't take it himself. So it's not just, I mean, the South Korean team isn't just about Son, is it?
Right, but I think he missed a couple in friendlies recently. I can't remember. I think a South American team might remember. But yes, I think he missed a couple of penalties in successive games for the national team, and then he said, "Look, I'm not going to do it anymore," and then passed it over. But yes, I think the problem for Son and Korea is that he's of course the best player in the team, and if you probably remember from the last World Cup, and I think not only so much pressure comes on him because he's so popular, he's a big star in Korea and he's the best player, a lot of expectations, and I think sometimes he takes it on himself too. I think he tries to do too much for the team, and he's trying to get involved in everything, which is not always ideal. So hopefully, especially with a new coach, a Portuguese coach called Paulo Bento, he can maybe try and help this a little bit, but we'll have to wait and see. But yeah, as I said, it was quite a surprise to see him play because most people expected him to be rested because he's played so many games recently. He's travelled so much, of course, the World Cup, and then went to the Asian Games in Indonesia in August, and now it's in the Middle East. And he keeps going back to Korea for friendlies, and of course, Champions League and all the rest for Tottenham. So it must be a little bit tired, but he looked quite fresh when he played against China. And as you say, he played really well.
08085 909 is our number if you'd like to talk football in Asia or South America, and players from over there playing in our leagues as well. Before I go on to Casey in Chicago, just bear with me, Casey, because a point that I want to make to both of our pundits tonight is, remember, I read the text out that was demanding a little bit of humour tonight from both Johnny Duerden and Tim Vickery. Well, so far, it's our listeners that have provided the jokes, like this one. Cheer up, Sean, and this is Sean in Cumbria, whose text we read out a moment ago. Cheer up, Sean, it may never happen. Indeed. So let me remind you of what her text said. Depressed about the Brexit goings on. I need cheering up. Oh, cheer up, Sean. It may never happen. I don't know what that refers to. I'm staying out of the politics. Casey in Chicago, you lot have got enough politics of your own with the shutdown, haven't you?
Yeah, well, let's not talk about that.
Okay, so we won't talk about Mexico either then, because that's at the heart of the shutdown, isn't it? Big wall.
Well, if you don't remember, I'm the Colo Torres, so I go all over the place.
Well, Colo Torres, you do indeed. You come over here, you go over there, we seek you here, there and everywhere. And you're going to Uruguay and Mexico this morning?
I'm going to Uruguay for 10. I guess I actually have two questions for the presenters, but good morning, guys. Tim,
morning.
There's talks about Maxi Gomez going to West Ham. How actually likely that is, I don't really know, because there are teams like Barcelona after his services. And then I guess on the other side of that, do you guys actually believe that Arnautovic could end up in China in the next week, since we're talking Asia?
Good. And you're a West Ham supporter, are you, as I recall?
Yes.
I am.
Yeah.
A long-suffering one.
Okay, so you want to know about Arnautovic. But, Tim, first of all, who is this geezer?
Maxi Gomez, the bull, unleash the bull. He's a Uruguayan striker, early 20s, I think 22, who is in his second seasons in Spain with Celta Vigo and doing very, very well. He had a terrific debut season. Is the second season going to be harder? No, it hasn't been. He is the coming man for Uruguay, and he's the long-term successor to Suarez and Cavani. And Celta Vigo, they know that they will have to sell. I don't think they want to sell now. Their plan is to sell in your summer. They've already lined up a replacement, another very strong Uruguayan striker, Gabriel Fernandez from Peñarol in Uruguay, who I think is going to be going over in the summer. So their plan was to keep Maxi Gomez, and they need him. When you look at the league table at the moment, I think Celta Vigo are only just above the relegation places, and they're leaking goals all over the place. So, to sell their leading goal scorer now would really be flirting with relegation. So it's going to take a lot of money to part with him now. There is competition. There's been speculation about Barcelona and him being a kind of successor for Luis Suarez there. From a Tottenham point of view, I also think he would make a lot of sense, because the problem that Tottenham would have luring another striker is that usually Harry Kane is fit and wants to play. So you're not going to get that many opportunities. So it's difficult to get a big name in to perhaps play second fiddle. But at the point where Maxi Gomez is in his career, I don't think he would necessarily mind that, as long as he gets enough games under his belt, which over the course of a couple of Premier League seasons he would, and then either he takes over as senior striker or he's moved on elsewhere. I like him very, very much. He is so physically strong. He reminds me a little bit of someone like Nat Lofthouse or something, going back to the Lion of Vienna, like a kind of Roy of the Rovers type old-fashioned striker. Opponents just bounce off him. You get service into that penalty box, he will attack it. He can drop outside the penalty box and combine. In no way is he anything like the kind of subtle performer of Arnautovic. So it would be, and I'd be surprised if he goes to West Ham now, as I've said. But if he does go, it would entail a change of style for West Ham, because he's a much more direct player, a much less subtle player, but a very, very good one, and one of those who you think, almost because of this kind of Nat Lofthouse style of play and physical stature, one of those you think is almost made to measure for the Premier League. So if Barcelona doesn't come knocking in the summer, I think he'll certainly be in England.
So, Casey, before we play a little dub in Dubai, do you want to ask Tim any questions on that one?
Yeah, I guess at the end of the day, I know he's not like Arnautovic, but it's really interesting because, Manuel Pellegrini isn't really, over that small stretch where Arnautovic was actually out injured, we played really well with Chicharito up front. I know he's a bit bigger, he's apparently kind of hasty, but is there any way to compare him to maybe Chicharito in the way he's played in the last couple? Well, not that you would necessarily know in Brazil, but the way that he plays.
Stronger, less of just a poacher, a physical battering ram. And one problem perhaps with him is that, and he really does put himself about, and he's picking up cards. He picks up cards. And Uruguay's coach phoned him up a few months ago to say, look, congratulations on the goals, but you're picking up too many yellow cards, son. Calm yourself down a little bit. I don't think Javier Hernandez picks up too many cards, does he? You don't see a lot of him unless he's kind of poaching in the goal area. I think Gomez offers a little bit more, and I think it's going to be a very, very lucky club who gets him. But I would be surprised if Celta Vigo sell now, and it really would be a dangerous move for them to sell now, because they would be flirting with relegation.
Okay, thank you very much. And Casey, just a point of order, we don't call it a second question on the World Football Phone-In. You're a Brazilian shirt holder. What do we call it?
I honestly cannot remember. I've been sick for the last 3 days, so a supplementary question. There you go. Just
cut him some slack.
Okay, only because he's been ill. It's a sub question. Remember that. This is Subutio. So it's a sub question, and there are a few of those. So let's pass that sub question over to Dubai. Any idea as to where Arnautovic is going to end up by the end of January, Johnny?
Well, I have my doubts about China, to be honest. I know there's been a lot of talk about a big money move to China, and I think £45 million has been mentioned from some unnamed Chinese team. But you have to remember that in China, of course, because of all the money that's been spent over the years on big name foreign players and all the money that leaves the country, which is something the government doesn't like, and has been clamping down on in many fields, not only in football. Now, for a club to sign a foreign player, I think over kind of £5 million, they have to pay a so-called transfer tax, which is the same as the transfer fee again. So if these rumours are true that a Chinese team is going to spend £45 million on Arnautovic, then it's going to cost them double that, because they'll have to pay another £45 million in tax, in theory at least. So £90 million sounds quite a lot, to be honest. I think it's sometimes easy to use Chinese teams as in the marketplace, to get a player out there and maybe increase salary demands or whatever. But I'd be surprised if there's a team in China willing to pay that kind of money for him, to be honest.
I tell you what, he didn't look very happy as he walked off the pitch in the last weekend's match. Are you saying, though, that the great China experiment, exodus or whatever, is really over after spending all the money that they spent on the players previously?
Well, certainly it's been toned down a lot because, I mean, the amounts from 6, 7, 8 teams were quite hefty for uncertain returns. Some teams did quite well out of it. But, I mean, as I mentioned, the government doesn't like all this money leaving the country for, to line the pockets of agents and European football teams. So they want to kind of course, promote domestic development and want to cut down on these really big name money deals. I think there may be 3 or 4 teams in China. If there's a really big star available, they could make it happen. But I'm not sure the West Ham striker fits the bill. I think for what he would cost, I think they would look elsewhere. But you never quite know. In Chinese football always moves in mysterious ways. But as I said, I do have doubts about this, just because the spending has been toned down and it would cost a lot of money, especially for a Chinese team.
And that wasn't a pun, was it? The mysterious ways, moves in mysterious ways. They do 4-4-2, I'd have thought.
Well, all the foreign coaches now, all kinds of formations.
Exactly. We'll come on to that. I haven't forgotten about the foreign coaches. Alan in Reigate is with us. Oh, by the way, Casey, thanks a lot for the call. Alan, hello. How are you?
Hello. Good, thank you.
You go ahead. You've got a question.
Yeah? I just have a confession to make.
Oh, I like this. Confession time. Let me put on my priest's hat for you. Yeah.
So my five-a-side team, we've given ourselves unofficial Brazilian shirt names.
Yeah, that's all right.
So they are, like the sort of dodgy kits that Tim brings back from Brazil.
So you remember.
Unofficial. Yeah. But we've got some good ones in there. I just wanted to do 2 before I ask a question.
Yeah.
One of the lads, his surname is Warburton, like the bread makers.
Yeah.
So his name is Toastao.
Very good. We like that. That's good. That's good.
Sold to the man with the money in his hand.
Yes.
My one is, I'm Welsh and my surname is Bell, so I'm Claudio Taffy Bell, like Taffarel. And my favourite one is a guy, he works for the company who make, amongst other things, Andrex toilet paper. And we're kind of split on this one. Some of us call him Kaka.
Oh, no.
And some of us call him Dunga. I prefer Dunga myself.
And is Dunga? We'll take a Dunga.
Brilliant.
Yeah.
Listen, just before you continue then, allow me to invite other listeners. If you've given yourselves or somebody else a Brazilian shirt name, do text us what that shirt name is now on 85058. But you've got to put it in context. You've got to explain why that shirt name fits you or anybody else that has been given the shirt name. I'd love to hear from you. 85058 by text. Well done, Alan, for giving us a great idea for today's programme. It will cheer up Sian in Cumbria. She's a bit down over Brexit and all of that stuff. Anyway, you go ahead.
So my question was, Tim wrote an article recently about South American players, lots of talent also go into the States now. So as well as everyone leaving for Europe, they've now got the sort of player drain to North America. And I was just wondering what the future holds for the leagues in South America, whether, are the crowds dwindling, with not many stars playing there, and really what the future holds for them down there.
It's an excellent question. I've spent many years criticising crowds here for not turning up. And I've come to the conclusion that I've probably been wrong all of this time, because I think these days, if I was a fan, I'd be at home watching Barcelona. I wouldn't be going to the games, because the quality has fallen so much over the 25 years that I've been here. But it still remains pretty strong, and perhaps stronger than it should be, given the quality of the spectacle. And I think football is so strong; it goes so deeply into the roots of these societies. And also, there's as a journo mate of mine over here, he says, the great thing about football, it doesn't have to be good to be good. If it had to be good, There will be no audience at all for like Division 3 in England or whatever, But it can still be a good spectacle, even if the game isn't great quality.
Well, like
so
the Cup
it
of
is
America final.
Given
another Cup of America,
Sorry, Alan.
the final of the South American Championship, the Boca River game.
Yes, yeah.
The quality wasn't great.
Yeah,
but it was
the
amazing
Libertadores.
Yeah, Libertadores.
Exactly. Yeah. Exactly. A fabulous occasion, and very often I think the atmosphere in the stands can be better than the game on the field. And sometimes you think some of the people who go sometimes more for the sense of communion that they get in the stands than for the action on the field. What do I think long term? The salvation for me could come from the rise of soccer in the US, because I think the synergies there are so clear. Football in the United States has made such progress, but it still lacks credibility somehow. Football in South America is not making progress, but it is awash with credibility. You put those two together and that synergy is obvious. We're also seeing at the top level some sides in a good financial position. We're seeing more differentiation inside South American football. So here in Brazil, for example, there are a handful of clubs now where historically you've thought of 12 big clubs. I don't think you can really do that anymore, but you can certainly think of 3 or 4 potential absolute superpowers who are assembling very, very deep squads. And so maybe along the way we're going to lose some of the giant clubs, some of the ones who will still be around, but they perhaps won't have the giant status that they used to have. And we've got an interesting case at the moment with Santos. Now, there's no more famous name in Brazilian football than Santos. It's Pelé's old club. It's probably still the most famous Brazilian club abroad because they travelled so much. They became the kind of Harlem Globetrotters of football. They had to pay for Pelé and his excellent supporting cast, so that they travelled all over the world. But Santos, it's a relatively small club, really. I mean, the city of Santos is in some ways a bit like Brighton. It's a port as well as a beach resort, but it's utterly dwarfed by the metropolis of São Paulo, which is just an hour's drive away, which has mega teams in Palmeiras and Corinthians. Now, Jorge Sampaoli, the Argentine, who was disastrous of Argentina Cup, now coach of Santos, he's only just taken over. He's fighting very, very hard just in pre-season. He's seen that they don't have very much money. And whereas Palmeiras under Scolari and Flamengo here in Rio are trying to get squads that are so deep that they've got 2 players for every position, well, Santos are struggling to get 1 player for every position at the moment. And Sampaoli is saying, I had no idea that financially that the club was in such a weak position. And a club with the name of Santos, we should be in a better position. But that's not the way it's going to be, I think, for the long-term future. So a few super clubs and some famous names, I think, are going to struggle to be famous names.
Oh, it sounds so great when your line plays up, Tim. It's you can't imagine the pleasure that both the likes of Sean and Derek are getting tonight. They were both down. They needed cheering up. And you came along and started talking. It sounded something like this. Straight out of Compton, crazy, called Ice Cube, from the gang called With Attitude. When I'm called off, I got a sword off. Squeeze trigger, and what is that, You two... with me. It sounded like that. It was great. It was fantastic. Have you ever thought about being a rapper?
You have to guess the missing words.
And sometimes sentences.
They were the best ones as well. They were the best ones.
Of course they were. And we don't have a bleeper, but we have got a phone line, a dodgy phone line from South America. So you carry on.
Expressed myself to my full capabilities.
Exactly.
Now I'm living in correctional facilities.
One of my favourite lines, in all of rap history. Anyway, it's not about my lines, it's about your lines and your questions. 08085909693. We're here to cheer up all our listeners tonight. We're talking football in Asia and South America. In Asia, they're competing in the Asian Cup. Johnny Durden, our Northern Soul, is in Dubai, covering that for us tonight. He'll take any questions on football in Asia and players from over there playing in our leagues. The legend Dino is in South America in Rio, Tim Vickery, taking any questions on South American football, players from over there playing in our leagues. And you, of course, play an essential part in this. No word of a lie, there are some amazing questions for this morning's World Football Phone-In that I do want to get to. So I'm going to cut that.
Hang on. There's one amazing question which is hanging over the programme now. Did you really confuse the name of our newsreader with Jimi Hendrix Drummer?
Yes, I did. It's an easy mistake to make. I said formerly of this parish. When you leave this parish, my memory goes, okay? Mitch Mansfield, who's a proper trooper. He's in on crutches tonight. He's a proper trooper. Sorry to let him go. He was the one who put, if those of you remember, a lot of our World Cup and phone and our anniversary phone-in last year together as well. So proper trooper. Anyway,
wonderful effort.
Yeah, absolutely.
If he does the news at 3:00, can you introduce him as the Voodoo Child?
I just try to say no jokes. We've got some honestly some great questions, and you'll be delighted.
I've got to cheer Sean up.
She's cheered up. I'm sure she's curling around with laughter, trust me. Rolling in the aisles, no doubt. Andrew, the gent, is with us, though, in Blackheath. Good morning, Andrew.
Good morning, Dalton. Good morning, everybody else, including Tim. I've got a comment rather than a question, but question as well.
Yeah.
First of all...
Can we comment on your comment when you've commented? Can we comment on your comment, if you see what I mean?
That's right.
Good.
Yeah. But I have a personal moment. On Tuesday, I'm having to go into St. Thomas's Hospital for quite a serious heart operation. I'll be there for 2 or 3 weeks, so think of me and wish me the best.
That's St. Thomas's.
We're going in there with you, gents. We're going in there with you.
St. Thomas's, yeah?
Yeah.
I'll come by and visit you. I'll try and come by and visit
briefly,
you.
They stop your heart for 5 hours while they work on it. A machine takes over the running of the pumping of the blood. My question is, what if that machine breaks down? Have they got a standby ready, a good reserve? So there you are. Something to worry about. But anyhow, the main purpose, people going to China. I've seen snippets of Chinese football. It doesn't compare with Australia even, or the States. The football is never as huge as they make out. The only reason our chaps go there is mercenary. They think they're going to earn millions. It hardly ever happens. 2 or 3 months, and they've had enough and they come back. Unless I'm mistaken, I can't think of one English or British player who's been successful in China. Can you? So I don't know what Tim thinks, but I think if you're earning 50,000 a week here, surely don't be greedy. That's more than enough. Stop going to China and then coming back with your tails between your legs a few months later. What do you reckon, Tim?
Well, let's ask Johnny what he reckons.
Well, I think it's one for Johnny.
Yeah,
it's one for John. So I'm going to kick this one across to Dubai.
Don't worry, Tim's second fiddle tonight. Don't worry about that, gentlemen. Hang on, because we'll speak to you in a second or two as well. Johnny?
Well, I hope the operation goes very well, gent. Good luck with that. And
by the way, I'm sorry I forgot about you. I only just turned on. I didn't realise you were on.
It's okay. I mean, it's a good question. I mean, of course, people do come to China for the money. But my team, Blackburn Rovers, we won the title in 1995 because we spent lots of money, and players who otherwise wouldn't have come came to join us. But the money can be good in China, especially with a top player. And of course, some players don't settle. I mean, Anelka and Drogba, they came in 2012 and do it back home a few months later. But some players, do settle and thrive, like Paulinho, for one, who's done very, very well in China and looks a very good player. And I think it's up to the player. I think you can go to China as a player and really try to make a difference, because that's what they're looking for. It's not only the goals you score, the passes you make, but also the professional background you have, and can you help the local players, either directly or indirectly? Can you be a hero for the local fans? And if you kind of embrace that and you really get involved and try to help as much as possible, I think you can have a really interesting football and also cultural experience, where you can really look back on your time there and say, look, I helped Chinese football develop a little bit. No, I didn't just go there and collect my pay packet, and some players just do that, but other players
Johnny,
do really.
You watch Chinese football much more than I do. What is the level of their play, generally speaking? What level?
Well, for the top teams, I mean, Chinese football isn't that great. It's improving a little bit. You can see with the national team, still a long way to go. I mean, the club teams have improved, of course, because a lot of the reason because they've been signing some very, very talented players.
Yeah.
But, of course, you could say that the Chinese champion Shanghai, and they wouldn't be able to survive in the English Premier League for sure. But on an Asian level, but they're improving. And I think.
Sorry, Johnny. Just sorry to cut you, because I know the gent would like a Sean Wheelock big wheel type of answer, i.e. he would, well, I know this because whenever somebody asks the big wheel about the level of football in America, he would compare it to the championship or the first division or the second. In fact, he only ever compared it to the championship. In that respect, which league would you compare the level of football in China to, so it'll make sense for all of us?
Okay, I think for the top teams, I'd like to think they'd be okay maybe in the championship. In terms of technical ability and all-round skill levels, I think they struggle, of course, with the intensity of the championship if it actually happened. But certainly, I think I'd hope that would be the case. But the weaker Chinese teams wouldn't be at that level at all. But
and forgive me for cutting again. So they spend 100 million quid on somebody like Oscar, and they're only on the level of the championship.
Yes, but you have to spend that kind of money if you want to get those kind of players to come. I think you have to pay over the odds, as it were, because otherwise, China is not seen as a footballing hotspot.
So what level? What level would they be if they? I'm sorry to cut you, and I promise this is the last time. Just on behalf of the gent who is, on top form, gent. Forgive me, but certainly you're being polite tonight, aren't you? Because normally by now we would have mentioned one of the best Polish footballers of all time. And awesome Polish vodka. And we haven't mentioned that so far.
And the second best, Orisa Debe.
Thank you very much. Very kind of you. Very kind of you. We'll take that. In Nigeria, we'll definitely take that. So the gent's being very gentle with you, Johnny. If you took out all those imported players, what level would Chinese football be?
Well, I think that's a bit of an unfair question because if you took out all the imported players from, say, Manchester City, what level would they be? And the Premier League as well. Perhaps it wouldn't be quite as strong. But,
fair point.
Yeah, and also you have to remember
Neil
Chinese
Warnock
teams
would be the manager.
Yeah.
Very good.
They certainly would. And also, what Chinese teams do have, they have a limit of 4 foreign players. So, and one of those has to be from a fellow Asian nation. So there's only 3 non-Asian players allowed to play at any time. So most of the teams, the majority of the teams have are Chinese players, which happens all over. Most Asian leagues have this rule as well. So you don't really have. If they could import 11 foreign players to play, then maybe Chinese teams would be some of the best in the world, and then we'd be having a different conversation.
Jen, a lot of love for you on social media and otherwise, I should say. One of our listeners says, tell the gent not to worry. I've had the same operation. It's routine for the doctors and nurses. You'll be fine.
Before I break, just to finish off, indulge me. A famous Polish player you all know about, Robert Lewandowski.
Yeah, there we go. Now this is the gent. This is the gent that we know and love.
He's been playing in the Bundesliga for 4 years. Each year he scores 30 goals plus. Now, last 3 years they've been picking the best player. It's been him. This year he's come fourth. Why? He's too selfish. He never parts as well. A Polish website proved that Lewandowski has created more assists this season than any player in the Bundesliga. So they've got something against him. I know what it is. He wanted to go to Real Madrid about a year ago, and they just don't like him anymore. If you notice, they never cheer their goals. He has to put his cup hands to his ears to see if they'll give him a cheer or two when he scores a great goal. Not fair.
That's more like the gent. Gent, I'll ask you to do me a favour. Could you get your grandson to contact me? And he's our cheerleader at Charlton, as you know. Could you get him to contact me when it's okay to come and visit you in hospital?
Yes,
and I'll visit you and report back for your...
Well, I really look forward to it. It's St Thomas's Hospital. I'm going on Tuesday. I'll be there probably nearly 2 weeks.
Yeah.
And then I'll be held up at home, so it might be easier for you to come and see me in my house.
Either way, but I don't want you to wake up and suddenly see me peering down at you. It might give you a heart attack, do you know what I mean?
No, I think, my angel has come to look after me.
Well, I'll take that. But genuinely, do get your grandson to contact me. I'd appreciate that, and I'll come and visit.
And thanks very much for the chat, and good luck to everybody on the program. Great program, as usual.
It's a pleasure. Thank you very much. And in case you don't know Vigen, he's a legend of the World Football Phone-In, so I'm sure we all wish him well. Like I said, lots and lots and lots of questions tonight. This one was from last week. He came at the very end of the programme last week. Michael in London sent this great text, and he's been a lot earlier today, so I've got to read it out. He says, question for Tim and Johnny, or Johnny D as he calls you. Which players make each of yours Mount Rushmore 11 in your respect? Well, it's a good one, isn't it? It's a brilliant one. In your respective regions, from a mainstream point of view and a personal point of view, which players, or if you like, one or two players will do, 3, 4, 5, as many as you want, which players would make your Mount Rushmore 11 in your respective regions? Tim first.
Teddy Roosevelt, speak softly and carry a big stick. He's up there anyway, I think. Who would I put up there? I think we have to interpret this personally, don't we? Players from my region I think there would have to be a place for Roberto Carlos, and I'll tell you why. And when I moved over here in '94, I just couldn't believe the quality of the players that I was watching who no one had ever heard of. And one of those was Roberto Carlos. I was watching him for Palmeiras and thinking, how on earth has Roberto Carlos not been discovered yet? Why is this fella not a world star? And obviously, 3 or 4 years later, he was a world star. So that was great. Being in it, that's one of the first great memories I have from moving over here, seeing Roberto Carlos. So he gets in. Lionel Messi obviously gets in for similar reasons. I was there telling everyone about him exactly 14 years ago in Colombia for the South American Under-20 Championships. So he certainly gets in. So there's two to start. The third one would be my favourite, Juan Fernando Quintero. The official favourite player of the World Football Phone-In, because he did what all of us would do if we were great players. In other words, go off the boil by eating too much and getting obsessed with music. But he came roaring back last year and had a terrific year for River Plate and for Colombia in the World Cup. So those three, they definitely go in. I think I would have Riquelme in as well. In my Mount Rushmore, a kind of player from a bygone age, either Riquelme or Veron. I know, there's English implication with Veron because he didn't really come off with United, and certainly didn't come off with Chelsea. Although I think with United he had some great nights in the Champions League, but overall it wasn't a success. But he was a great player, and if he didn't come off in England, that's English football's loss. I saw him at the start and I saw him at the finish, and that was a privilege. So maybe him as well as Riquelme. Can I think of any others? I think we got 5 there, and that's enough for your Mount Rushmore, isn't it?
Well, it is if you interpret the question to mean which are your favourite 5 players. Surely Mount Rushmore is about the national monuments. Which players stand out as national monuments. I would have thought, Tim. I was going to interrupt you, but you were in such a flow.
But the word personal was there. The word personal was in the text.
Yeah, but still,
so that doesn't
it's
have
in the
to
context.
be...
Of course it does. It's still in the context of national monument. Your personal choices for the national monument.
It's my nation. I've just formed my own nation. I'm not going to be bullied by someone who confuses the newsreader with Jimi Hendrix drummer.
At least.
Hey, Dalton.
He won't let that one go.
You got the news reader's name wrong.
He will not let that one go tonight. I make one simple mistake. A referee makes one simple mistake and they start calling in VAR. Anyway, Johnny, you understand the language. Mount Rushmore, it's a national monument in the United States. Which players from Asia would make your Mount Rushmore 3, 4 or 5?
I think for players who've made a difference in Asian football, I think you have to start perhaps with Nakata, Hidetoshi Nakata, who I think the first Asian, star in the modern football era, went to Italy and did very well.
And he's Japanese, isn't he?
And Japanese, yes, and he won the title. I think he was with Roma and Parma, and I think he was the first to kind of announce himself to the wider world. And of course, he was also there when Japan made their debut in the World Cup in '98. And he had a short spell at Bolton as well, and then he retired at the end of that. He thought that was enough. And I think it's one of those football players who always had other interests. I think now he's involved in kind of make kind of sake, sake, and the Japanese drink, and trying to make kind of a refined version of that. I think he also edits kind of luxury men's magazines and things like this, lifestyle magazines. So he's got lots of things going on. So he would be there. I think maybe Chad Duncan, who was a very famous Korean player who actually went to Germany in the 80s when no Asian player ever went overseas, and he spent about 8 or 9 years in the Bundesliga, and he was a very good player. He won the UEFA Cup a couple of times, played for Frankfurt, I think Bayer Leverkusen, and the Germans called him Chaboom. He had a fierce shot, and he's a very influential, very famous player. Some would say the best Asian player ever. I don't know about that, but certainly he was very important. Maybe over the Western side, maybe Sami Al-Jabir of Saudi Arabia, who played at 4 World Cups from 94 to 2006, a very influential player. He had a short spell with Wolverhampton Wanderers, I think, in 2000. He loved it in England, but he couldn't stay. And he's also getting involved in Saudi Arabian development, and a very, very intelligent guy. So I think those three would be quite representative of Asia. Ali Daei, of course, the Iranian international leading goal scorer of all time. He scored, I think, 109 goals, I think, something silly like that. And, of course, he's a legend in Iran and in Asia. And he also has a fantastic moustache as well. And I think that always helps.
Yeah. It does, actually. It does. Because,
hard to carve.
It helps.
It's hard for a sculptor.
No, he said moustache, and I'm thinking immediately Teddy Roosevelt, because he had a moustache, didn't he? And so you've listened and learned from Johnny Duerden, Tim. Take lessons. Oh, by the way, I mentioned the love for the gent, a little bit more for you, gent, from one of our listeners who says we'll all be thinking about the gent on Tuesday when he has his heart op. I definitely will be. Hang on in there. And also, the gent, you might want to translate this for me. I have no idea, but I'm presuming this is Polish. Tijmaj Sir. Tijmaj Sir. I hope that cheers you up in any case. Talking of cheering up, this one, more reasons to be cheerful for you, Johnny. Not only did you answer that Mount Rushmore question so emphatically, unlike a certain Legendino, but this one's coming from you, from Robert. Is David McCreary, ex-Man United midfielder, still out in Asia coaching or managing? And if so, how's he doing? And who else from the old First Division is making a name for themselves in the Asian leagues?
Oh, wow. Yeah, David McCreary, he was... I think he did have a spell coaching in Myanmar, I think, and I think Malaysia too, a short spell. I'm not sure what he's doing now, but I think I occasionally talked to his son, and I think his son is involved, is kind of a football agent, has a football agency. So I think his family is involved in Southeast Asian football. But yes, that's a bit of a blast from the past. And old First Division players doing well in Asia, then... Steve Coppell is in India. I think he's been there for a while now. He's done quite well. John Gregory, who was Aston Villa manager and in the 90s, he just won the Indian Super League title with Chennai not long ago in 2018. So he's doing very well. Maybe there's Radi Abramovic was a Notts County goalkeeper, I think 1980-81, I think from Yugoslavia at the time, and he he managed Singapore for 10 years, and he went to Myanmar, and then he went to Kuwait national team for a while. So he would be another one. But so there's a few who are still knocking around. And then going back, like Brian Robson and Peter Reid have been in Thailand as well. So, but it's not as many as there used to be, of course.
Yeah, let me introduce you to a mate of mine, one of the funniest guys on radio, Mark in Canary Wharf. Hello.
Oh, God, that's a build-up that I can't do.
Of course you can. Of course you can. You kept me in stitches.
I'm not for a stand-up show. Don't ever say, this is the funniest guy alive. You just killed it.
Apologies. Well, when you become a regular, you get your own Brazilian shirt name. You'll see. People will appreciate it. Yeah. Great to speak to you. And I'm genuinely, we've never met, but sometimes you call me on a different phone in, and generally, I'm still in stitches about something you said the other night. And it had nothing to do with Mississippi John Hurt. Anyway, feel free. The floor is all yours.
Well, I'm curious. This isn't funny, but this is just a question I have. The Premier League was built pretty much on the model that the Chinese are using now. If I'm honest, that if you look through Italy and Spain, a lot of the players that came to the Premier League in the early 90s were way past their best. You can think of loads of them that just weren't, and they were paid vast amounts of money that the Italians, Serie A wouldn't pay, etc., and they were happy to pay. They couldn't believe that you were coming along and buying people, and just that's the same model the Chinese are using. And yet the attitude seems to be, oh, look at these people going to China, or look at the Chinese with their league. Why would you sort of dismiss what's become the premier business model, if not just the Premier League in the world? Somebody with money doing exactly the same thing. Surely that should be a danger more than just the sort of off-the-cuff, oh, it's just the Chinese and it's just the money-grabbing people going. Because you could have said the same thing about Hullet, Vialli, Zuka. There's loads of these players who came, let's be honest. The Premier League, George Weah, you didn't see the best of them by a million miles.
Johnny?
Yeah, it's a good point. Of course, I mean, in the 90s, when the foreign players started to come to England, you're right. I mean, Vialli and Zola and Hullet were, not that far off retirement, weren't they? And I think, of course, the difference is, I mean, in China, it doesn't quite have the history and the structure of English football. But yeah, I mean, as people tend to do, the Chinese have looked at the Premier League and the big leagues in Europe and think, well, we want a little bit of them. That's what we're aspiring to become, or something similar. And so we'll do the same as what they did. And I think there's some hypocrisy about it. I remember when Shanghai did sign Oscar from Chelsea a couple of years ago, and the Chelsea coach Conte said all this Chinese money is dangerous. But I'm sure Oscar didn't grow up in South America dreaming of playing for Chelsea. I doubt that happened very much. So yeah, I think money, of course, plays a part.
Just on that note, Tim, you're our football historian. Sorry, Mark, did you want to come back on that?
Well, it's just interesting that it's an Italian coach, Conte, who sees the danger of the same thing that happened with Serie A, that was the best league in the world. He sees the danger of players being taken from the Premier League to China, but maybe the people in England just don't see the danger. They're blind to it. It'll be too late. That's kind of the point I was going to make.
Well, I'm going to get the legend Dino's response to that, because he's our football historian from back in the dark ages in the First Division. Do you remember what the First Division used to be? Well, Tim Vickery will know all about that and put perspective on that question in a moment or two.
So you've got to go all along the wall tower, haven't you?
Yeah, he's doing his old NWA impersonation again. And this is a World Football Phone-In on 5 Live. We're talking football in Asia and in South America this morning. Our Northern Soul, Johnny Duerden, is in Dubai covering the Asia Cup. So if you've got any questions for him on football in Asia generally, Asian Cup questions, or indeed football or questions on footballers from Asia in our leagues, feel free to give him a call on 08085 909 693. The same goes for any questions on South American football. The legendino Tim Vickery is in Rio, as always, covering any questions you might have on South American football, indeed questions on players from over there playing in our leagues as well. We don't just ask questions about players. We know that football is part of a bigger world, so your questions can embrace whether it's social, political aspects or historical aspects of those regions as well. We all learn things from football. I learned something the other day about football, and I'll come on to that in a moment or two. And Tim, I'm going to ask you to answer the second part of Mark in Canary Wharf's question in just a moment or two. But both of you must be like linguists, because I'm presuming when you're over in South America, Tim, you have to learn to read a bit of Portuguese, and you talk Portuguese on Brazilian telly. And you, Johnny, I'm sure, you speak South Korean as well and you read South Korean and all that. Am I right?
Well, Korean, yes. I mean, North Korea and South Korea have...
of course. Language
but having said that, in football terms, I mean, in North Korea, in South Korea, there's lots of English words that come into the language. And of course, especially in football, like goalkeeper and penalty and things like this.
Well, and also Gangnam came into the language as well, didn't it? Yeah.
Right, but in North Korea, they don't do that. I mean, they don't have the pure Korean words all the time, which is occasionally a problem because on the occasion it happens, like in the Winter Olympics, you get a joint Korean team. I think they fielded a joint ice hockey team, I think, in women's ice hockey team in the Winter Olympics last time. Of course, the two sets of players speak Korean, but they have very different, they use different sporting terms. And it can get a bit confusing. But yes, I mean, I remember going to a press conference with a North Korean national team coach, and he didn't say the word goalkeeper. He said the word muntiki, which is literally is a kind of door protector, which I thought is a very, very cute way to put it. But so even in Korea, I mean, because it's been like 60 or 65 years between, since the end of the Korean War, and there's no contact between the two countries, not like West and East Germany. So I think the language, of course, is evolving on both sides, but especially in South Korea, because as I say, you get lots of English words that are absorbed into language here in Seoul, but not in Pyongyang.
And I suppose it's a similar thing in South America, Tim. It's not that there's like a North and South Korea that haven't seen each other and spoken to each other for 100 years or so, but because everybody else in South America speaks Spanish, so for them, this Portuguese business that you lot speak must be quite confusing. Is there a word for... is there a word like the goalkeeper that is shared amongst you or not shared amongst you?
Yeah, I mean, Spanish speakers really struggle with Portuguese, really struggle with it. They struggle to understand it. But maybe I found that fascinating there from John about how the language has developed in different ways, either side of the parallel there in Korea. Fascinating. The closest I can come to this, I think, is Paraguay. Paraguay is very, very strong indigenous. It's a place where the indigenous population have absorbed the European colonialists rather than the other way around. So Paraguay, as well as speaking Spanish, they still speak Guarani, the original indigenous language. And the lower down the social scale you go, the more chance that they'll only speak Guarani. One of my mates, Paraguayan mate, his mum just died. She didn't speak Spanish. She was Paraguayan. She didn't speak a word of Spanish. She just spoke Guarani. And this means that when Paraguay play their continental rivals, the players will speak Guarani. So it utterly confuses the opposition who've got no idea what they're talking about.
I hope they've got an idea. Anyway, this is by way of saying to you both that Marky Morecambe has sent in a text. He says, best of luck to the gent. Look forward to hearing him waxing lyrical on Robert Lewandowski next month. And then he sends this message to him. I'm having to learn Polish tonight, and I want one of you to translate it for me if you can. It's essentially wszystkiego
najlepszego. Wszystkiego najlepszego.
And who said that?
Me, Marta.
Marta Newman?
Yes.
Yeah,
I can't believe you didn't know that I speak Polish fluently.
I can't believe that you interrupted me when I was trying to speak Polish fluently. I can't believe that. What, you speak fluent Polish?
Yes.
Why didn't you speak to the gent? He was here a moment or two
ago.
I know,
I listened to him. Yeah. And then when he said Polish, I asked Mitch and I was like, is he Polish? And Mitch said, kind of gave me a little biog. And I was like, oh, that's really nice. And so, I could have spoke Polish to him.
And you've ruined my teaser for both Tim and Johnny. I was going to say, you learn all these... You can't even say get well soon to the gent. Is that what it means, get well soon?
Wszystkiego najlepszego means all the best.
Why do you have to say it so fast? Can you not say it a bit slower?
Wszystkiego najlepszego.
Actually, it sounds better when you say it fast. Just one more time.
Wszystkiego najlepszego.
Okay, thank you very much, Marta.
Oh, my pleasure.
It's very kind of you. There you go. You see, we're not just Five Live for nothing. We speak all the languages and embrace all the languages as well. We're linguists along the way. So, Mark in Canary Wharf was asking, are you still there, Mark?
Listening to voices from the gods in Polish, apparently.
Exactly.
From nowhere.
I said he was a funny guy. Just remind me about that because I want Tim to answer that question as well about the perspective of bringing in foreign players who are past their best.
Yeah, essentially the Premier League's business model was to bring in players and pay over the odds from Serie A, etc., and Spain to a certain degree, and bring them to the Premier League to build the brand. It was a brand new league. I know that you've gone from the first division to the Premier League, and the Chinese are doing the same. And before the news you mentioned about Conte and his warning, and maybe he sees it more because of the generation he was in Serie A, and the English don't see it, possibly. That was the question. That was the sort of point I was making. I would say one quick thing about Mount Rushmore. If ever you look at Thomas Jefferson on that, he looks exactly like Stan Bowles, the old English player.
Thank you for pointing that one out. It went past me for a moment, but 100% correct. So, Tim, from the South American perspective, though, all these old timers coming over, is that how you'd see it?
Well, I think Euro 96 was absolutely crucial for this process in the Premier League. It was after that, and immediately in the wake of that tournament, the Premier League started signing up everyone. It was a great showcase for the new English culture and the new English stadiums and so on. And it was soon afterwards that word filtered over this side of the Atlantic as well. Before that, whenever I was talking to players, it was always Spain or Italy. And then suddenly it became Spain, Italy or England, and not necessarily in that order. And the big motivation was, no doubt about it, it was financial. But as I'm going to pin this one back to Johnny in just a minute, but as Johnny has pointed out, there is a key difference between the English example and that of China, and that is that England already had an established football culture. My take on this whole thing is that I think the new of the Premier League has worked so well because the roots of the old are so strong. Now, in the case of China, it's an entirely different situation. They're trying to create a football culture from scratch. And the most interesting thing he told us in that answer was the restrictions on the number of foreign players. So they're trying to develop their own players as well. And my question based on that to John is, how is this different? And how much is this inspired by what Japan did when they launched their J League in the 80s? Because that was a similar case. That was lots and lots. They bought loads and loads of Brazilians. I mean, Zico had a huge impact launching the league, and they brought in Gary Lineker went there. I know there was a lot of money for nothing. He wasn't really fit enough to do himself justice, but that was there. How much have China been inspired? How much have China learnt from what Japan did?
Yeah, I think that's a good point. And also, interestingly, when Lineker and Zico played in the first season in the J League in '93, there's a player there, a Japanese player, a very, very famous Japanese player called Kazu Miura, and he's still playing. He's 51 years old. He's still playing professional football in Japan. Yeah. He signed a new contract this week. He plays in the second division. He doesn't play every game. He plays for Yokohama SC. He's 52, I think, in a couple of weeks. And he's the oldest player. I think last season he became the oldest player ever to score a professional goal in a professional league, which is quite amazing. But yes, I think China also looking to Japan because, as you mentioned, the J League started in '93, and the aim was to bring in the big players as well as trying to develop from the ground up. And that's what happens often, especially in East Asia, that they look at what happens in Europe and same in the economy and off the field as well. What they did in 50, 60, 70 years, we're going to try and do in 10, 15, 20 a lot faster. And I think it works. Certainly in the J League, the first 3 or 4 seasons were huge, big attendances, lots of excitement and big stars. Then it plateaued a bit, but then you start to get the young players coming through because Japan has a very, very good now youth development system. And then China's looking towards that as well, trying to get players to play football. We mentioned before, I mean, the big problem in China is that kids don't play football. People don't play football. You walk around any city, you don't see people playing football at all. You might see occasional table tennis and basketball being played, but football hardly ever. And there's a stat, I think, from about 2010, 2011, something like, it might be completely accurate, but Japan had like 300,000 under 12 players registered and China, which has 10 times population, had just a few hundred. So that's a challenge. And I think now you're finding that schools like to play football. I mean, there's a government program that's rolling this out along thousands and thousands of schools to actually get kids just to play. And I think that comes from Japan as well. I mean, and they've hired Japanese experts who've been working in Japan for years. And now they come to China and try and do the same thing there.
I generally mean this. I'm looking at a photograph of Stan Bowles in his England shirt, standing looking in the same direction as Thomas Jefferson is looking on Mount Rushmore. The hair's the same. I bet neither of you can guess what the one difference is. If these photographs are accurate, what's the one difference?
Jefferson's not wearing an English shirt.
Not looking at bookmakers.
Tim, I'm old enough to remember that. But that apart.
That's cruel. That's cruel.
What did you say, Johnny?
I'm a cruel man.
He's not wearing a football shirt.
Yeah, Jefferson's not wearing a football shirt. In fact, these are only headshots, or the sculptures are only the heads. So that goes without saying. No, they both parted their hair on opposite sides. So Stan Bowles is parted on the left-hand side and Jefferson's parted his hair on the right-hand side. Apart from that, they're double gangers, I promise you. Callum in Derby is with us. Hello, Callum.
Morning, guys.
Good morning.
Yes, my question would be if South America are still producing set-piece taking goalkeepers.
Good question, Tim.
It's been a while. There aren't so many around. There was that wonderful line where Higuita did it, Chilavert did it, Rogério Ceni did it, and Rogério Ceni scored more goals than any other goalkeeper. And one had inspired the other, who'd inspired the other, who'd inspired the other. At the moment, the cupboard's a little bit bare of them. It's a shame because it was magical when Rogério Ceni was doing it for São Paulo. Because you get that wonderful theatrical delay. Free kick near the opposition's goal. Is he going to go? Is he going to go all the way up there? Yes, he is. And then you've got the 30 seconds while he's making his way up and he anticipates. It's like one long drum roll until you get to the free kick. So I kind of regret the fact that for the moment we don't seem to have too many heirs to that wonderful tradition.
And despite the fact that Edison and Claudio Bravo play with their feet, how come?
Yeah, good point. Good point. And indeed, on the art of being a goalkeeper, of playing with your feet, is becoming more and more important in South America. I was talking earlier on about Sampaoli, Jorge Sampaoli, going to Santos, the Argentine coach going to Santos. Now, he wants a goalkeeper who can play with his feet. You remember it all went wrong for him in the World Cup when he went with Caballero, the Chelsea goalkeeper. And I remember, doing it with Pat Nevin on before the game, saying, this isn't going to work, it's not going to work, it's not. And my God, didn't that go wrong? It went horribly wrong. So he really wants a goalkeeper who can play with his feet. The problem is, the best player in the Santos side is their goalkeeper, Vanderlei, but he's not particularly good with his feet. So he wants him replaced. So he's complaining about the depth of his squad, and the one genuine, really terrific player he wants replaced. So I don't know. Maybe with more goalkeepers having to become more proficient with their feet, maybe we'll get one or two in the future. I was a little bit worried there when you told us about where Callum was calling from. I thought, oh God. Oh no! Oh no! We're going back to Sky. Yeah, we're going back to Sky. Yeah. What a cyber!
Just on the question of Spygate, Mark says, "Who would Tim and Johnny cast as the lead in the Marcelo Bielsa espionage thriller?" He's guessing it would be David Niven.
No, I don't know. Niv would never do anything that anyone would ever see as and Bielsa's so gloriously mad and complex, And I love telling. I'm going to tell it again. Sit yourself down. I'll tell it again. I love telling the story of the first time I ever saw Bielsa.
It's a good one.
Press conference, 1999 Copa America. His side have just lost 3-0 to Colombia. His centre forward missed 3 penalties, and he himself, Bielsa, was sent off. So you go into his press conference, and he's not making eye contact with anyone. He's just looking at some little place in space, And first question, Marcelo, what did you make of the referee today? And he makes a big play of getting the microphone, and he's organised the microphone, while not making eye contact with anyone. And he says, one doesn't have the habit of commenting on the activities of the matchday officials, but in respect of my expulsion, the referee was entirely correct because I protested in an ill-mannered form. And you're thinking, wow, what a fantastic fella. Can we have some more of this, please? Yeah. He likes nothing better. It's his favourite thing in life to say I was wrong. I failed. He absolutely loved it. And my heart sank when I saw he was going to give a press conference because I thought he was going to walk and he's going to resign. When Leeds came out with that statement about having to remind Bielsa of the club's reputation for integrity and honesty, I thought, oh, God, no, he'll walk. Instead of which, you get a fantastic masterclass of everything that he does and the ludicrous extent that he goes to prepare for matches. and while he's admitting his guilt, he really sticks it to Derby as well because, if anyone wants to know anything about any of Derby's tactical variations, it's all there for them. What a wonderful coup de grace. I'm so happy that Bielsa's gone to English football. After discovering him early, now I can share him with all of you, and that's a wonderful present to share.
And just off the back of Callum's excellent question, I thought a really interesting question about goalkeepers taking free kicks and the like. Bill in Jersey City, this is a great question, I think. Bill in Jersey City in the USA says his question is about players shooting from distance. A decade ago, it would have been unthinkable that a basketball player like the NBA's Steph Curry could come along and shoot so accurately from incredible distances. Do Tim and John think we may see a long-distance shooting revolution come to football, much in the same way that it's come to basketball in recent years? And I've seen a couple of games recently in the Premier League, Johnny, that suggests that, when all else fails, and this is including Man City, Tottenham, I can't even remember, Arsenal the other day against, was it West Ham? I'm telling you, when all else fails and the clock is running out, they will shoot from any distance. What do you think of Bill's question?
Yeah, well, I'd be interested to see. I don't know much about basketball, to be honest. So it means players are just shooting, throwing the ball from further and
Let's
further
say from the halfway line. What was the point of that, shooting from the halfway line?
But I think certainly in the dying seconds, why not? You see, I was at the game last week between Japan and Turkmenistan. And of course, Japan, strong favourites. But Turkmenistan, it's the second Asian Cup and working hard, but one of their players gets it about 40 yards out and walks forwards a few paces and fires a shot from long distance. Keeper should have saved it, but doesn't, and suddenly they're ahead, so why not? Give it a punt and then anything can happen. The goalkeeper's not quite in the right position or doesn't see it or just makes a mistake, and then you've got a goal and then anything can happen.
Why does that work, though, in the dying moment?
But there's a key difference. There's a key difference, isn't there? And I'm like Johnny. I don't know much about basketball, but I do know there isn't a little guy up in the net kind of guarding it. Where there is in football. And in order to score from long range, in basketball, the only thing, I know it's a big only thing, but the only thing you need is accuracy. In football, you need not only accuracy, you need a horrendous error from the goalkeeper or the goalkeeper to be doing a Manuel Neuer, down the other end. So last few minutes, it's just the easiest way of kicking away possession.
Be fair, Tim.
Now, what you really want to do, get the ball out wide, throw it into the box, and just hope. You've got people there attacking it. But it's the easiest way to give away possession to kind of try and shoot for 70 yards. Unless you get the element of surprise.
You're not being fair. For one thing, when you throw a ball or whatever they call it in basketball, there are defenders trying to...
ball, isn't it?
What? Anyway, whatever. Remember that hoop is only about the size of the ball. Whereas in a goal mouth, the goalkeeper can be there, but it's a huge goal. It's a huge goal. He can't cover the whole thing.
I think the only hoop The only hoop we should be talking about in the World Football Phone-In is Stan Bowles, the super hoop for Queen's Park Rangers. I think we've talked too many hoops already.
Yes.
Enough of these hoops.
Indeed. But what's the difference between? Why is it, as Johnny pointed out, in the dying moments of a match, there is still the possibility and the opportunity, and sometimes it works. You know, you do get a goal from long distance in the dying embers of a match. What's the difference between trying to shoot from long distance in the dying embers as opposed to shooting from long distance at the beginning? If it sometimes works, because
it doesn't do the percentage. Put it in the mixer. No, you want your centre half to be up playing centre forward, play it out wide, and then cross it into the penalty area where there's an angle helping those who are going to attack it. And there are many, on a kind of percentage basis, your possibilities of scoring that way are far, far greater than a shot from 50 or 60 yards.
Well, let me say, I thought it was a great question, Bill. Never mind them. I thought it was a fantastic question. Jack in South China says, question for Johnny, please. China is set to confirm the paperwork and call up the Leytonstone-born Brentford midfielder Nico Yeneris the first time. As far as I know, China have looked for players born outside the country, but with Chinese ancestry. Nico has a Chinese mother. Could this be the start of a trend for some Asian nations? And how will similar players be seen by the fans? I.e., will they be accepted as Chinese as the rest of the team, or will they be regarded as mercenaries, as the gent would describe it?
It's a good question. It's the first time, as you mentioned, I think Nick Yeneris, he's a player for Brentford. I think he's a former England U teams, and he's going to sign for the Chinese team very soon. And when he does, he's going to find a Chinese passport. It's not easy, I think, because the rules in China are if you take Chinese nationality, you can't have any other. There's no dual nationalities like some countries have. So I think it's very interesting to see what happens, assuming he plays for the national team. How it's all received. I think at the moment nobody knows. I think I talked to some Chinese journalists about this week and before the Korea game, and they were saying that the people are quite open to it because he does have Chinese heritage. It's not just it's not coming in from nowhere and getting a passport just because he's a good football player. There's some family history there, so it will be very interesting to see what happens. I mean, Japan's done this with players who have some Brazilian, born in Brazil, but they lived in Japan when they came over when they were kids. In some countries, like Qatar, of course, has naturalized lots of players, and many countries in Asia have, like Indonesia as well, Singapore. But some countries like South Korea and China haven't done it yet, but there have been discussions. So there'll be a lot of interest to see what happens with Yeneris in China and how he plays and how he does, because if he renounces his UK nationality then and doesn't do well in China, then he might find it hard to go back.
Thank you. And our listener in Warren Point says, Tim, listen to this one. David Beckham got a goal from halfway when he saw the goalkeeper standing out from his goal line. I thought you'd have brought in as well the Justin Fashanu one as well, Wonder Goals it was back in the day. And you're old enough to remember that.
We're still talking about because they're so rare.
Yeah, it's true. Fair point. But it's a shame that you had to say it because they're so rare. And with the legendino Tim Vickery, and with the other legend, our Northern Soul, Johnny Duerden, in Rio and Dubai respectively. Johnny's covering the Asia Cup there. And any questions you have on Asian football in Asia, and players from over there playing our leagues as well, he's happy to take. And the same for the legendino with regards to South American football. I did tell them, didn't I? Didn't I say that question about the long ball, at least a long shot, was a good one? And you heard how the legendino just dismissed it. Well, look at what's coming in by text now. Michael in London first says, I can actually see the amount of long shots dwindling if the rise of the pressing tactic continues, especially in the Premier League. The time you have on the ball is often extremely short, and the time and effort needed to even make space to set up a chance for a decent long shot often seems to be a perceived wrong decision in a game that increasingly demands the utility of safer, more efficient options on the ball. I know he's backing your theory. Don't get me wrong. I know he's backing your theory.
Yes,
I know.
good points.
I know. What I'm saying is that it was a good question. That's what I'm saying. Margaret in Lancashire.
I didn't dispute that.
Well, yeah, it's not over yet. Margaret in Lancashire says Xabi Alonso has scored a few long-range goals, and she's an LFC fan. And this is from Jonathan, who says, with regards to the other previous question, which was linked, in my mind, in any case, about goalkeepers, Jonathan says, I have huge respect for Tim's opinion. I love it when a text starts like that, because you know there's a but coming.
That means I'm totally wrong. Yeah.
Sorry, I love it. Anyway, I have huge respect for Tim's opinion, but in the age of the sweeper keeper, yeah, I know. In the age of, that's with one T, by the way. In the age of the sweeper keeper, wouldn't regularly taking long range? You only just got it. Is there a delay on the line or something like that?
Yeah.
You were the Beavis and Butthead guys. So I'm just telling you, there's only one T in this. But in the age of the
you're pretty cool, Billy Beavis.
Yes. Anyway, I have huge respect for Tim's opinion, but in the age of the sweeper keeper, wouldn't regularly taking long range shots foment some doubt in the minds about position and encourage them to sit a few yards closer to goal? If that were the case, then it could either create a little more space behind their defence or force them to also sit deeper, decompressing space in midfield. Or am I completely misguided? Actually, it was a reference to the same.
That's a really, really good logic. Really good logic. I like that one.
Yeah, and how about you, Johnny? Do you make a comment on that? Feel free.
Yeah, it's interesting. I think every team, must have a player who, when he gets the ball kind of 30 or 40 yards from goal, either the fans get excited or they think, oh my God, he's going to have a shot, and he never scores. There's always that one time when it happens, I think that's a player's point of view. Perhaps you think, I want to be a hero. I think Tim's completely right. It's not the logical thing to do in terms of percentage chance of scoring a goal, but I think on occasion it does work. It's something special. Maybe that's why they do it. Just this time I can be the hero, wins a game with a spectacular goal.
The great thing about a great question, in my interpretation of a great question from our listeners, is ones that tweak and trigger the imagination and interest of other listeners. So they, get out their phone and text, or get out their computers and email, or pick up the phone and give us a call in response to it. So feel free. 0800, 08085. Okay, I've done it again. 08085 909 693. If you'd like to join in the phone, you've got
Noel Redding reading the news at 4 o'clock.
If you've only just tuned in, let me just say, Tim has rinsed that one out for some time. I don't need to explain it to you. Please listen back on BBC Sounds. Indeed. Or, of course, you can get the podcast as well. Now, this one for you, Tim. This quick fire round, guys. Let's get as many of these in as we can. It's from our listener who says, to Tim, please. This is John in... It says Lichfield, is it? I hope it's Lichfield. Anyway, John in Lichfield. Oh, no, sorry, Titchfield in Hampshire. It says, Andreas D'Alessandro used to play for my team, Pompey. Never have I ever heard of a play, or never heard anything from Pompey on the World Football Phone-In. We've never mentioned a footballer from Pompey, and he wants to know what's he up to nowadays. What happened to him?
He's. I remember seeing him actually for Portsmouth at the Valley. I was back one year and I saw him play for Portsmouth at Charlton, and I think he scored a beauty and put an easier one over the bar. I remember Harry Redknapp at the time, who was Portsmouth manager, saying that if they could have got him to stay, he was there on loan, he would have wanted to have built his side around D'Alessandro, who he didn't quite, and he's still playing, he didn't quite reach the heights that I'd hoped for him when he broke through in 2001. I thought he was going to be the future of the Argentine midfield. I loved his kind of impish sense of destruction. He always reminded me of a kind of Bash Street kid, out the Beano, the kind of sense of fun and joy with which he played his football. He spent most of the last few years in Brazil with Internacional in the south of Brazil with Porto Alegre, and he's an absolute club legend there. They love him. Sometimes when I watch him, I think there's he's become very sharp, very smart, but sometimes I wonder if there's a little bit too much frustration in him. And perhaps that frustration, the fact that he didn't quite turn out to be the player that he had hoped to be. But he's still going strong. He's still an important player for International at maybe 37, 38 now, and still giving a lot of pleasure to people who watch him, because there is magic in that left foot, and there's still a kind of impish sense of fun and impish sense of destruction around the way that he plays the game. And
on a night that we're all wishing the gent well, you had to remind him of somebody putting a goal past Charlton. Dear, oh dear, oh dear. Sorry. That's okay. Dan in Eastbourne says, message for Johnny. How popular is Ali Reza Jahan Bakash? And he says, good luck saying that, Dotson. So thank you for the wishes. In Iran, since he signed for Brighton, the Twitter, Instagram feeds on the official sites have been inundated with angry Iranian supporters that he hasn't been selected for the first team on a regular basis.
Well, yes, because he was fantastic in the Netherlands. He played for AZ, I think, Alkmaar, and he was top scorer last season in the whole division, and he's a right winger. And he was one of Asia's most informed players. And when he signed for Brighton for quite a lot of money, he was expected that he might take some time to adjust, but he could take the Premier League by storm. But he's hardly played, hasn't played very much at all. So I think, and also it's cost him playing time with the national team as well. I think so. Iranian fans were very disappointed about that, and they were excited to see one of their best players playing in the Premier League, a player in great form, who everyone knows could do a really good job. So yes, they feel a bit let down, and Iranians are very, very passionate about football. Big fans, and hopefully sometimes players need time. I mean, maybe the second half of the season he'll play more. And when Son came to Tottenham, it took him a bit of time to settle down. It's only his second season he really started to show what he can do, and maybe that'll be the same.
Yeah, and Dan in Eastbourne has got a sub-question for you, Tim. Brighton defender midfielder Bernardo, who's the son of Bernardo Fernandes da Silva, has settled into the Brighton team now after a challenging debut. He worked hard to get back in the team, understood the improvements that were required for him to be the integral part of the team he now is. Do you think he could get a call-up to the Brazilian squad?
In a fullback position, well, maybe. I mean, it's a possibility. And Brazil are looking to change the balance of their fullbacks a little bit. For years and for decades, their fullbacks were the wingers, the flying forward. Think of Cafu and Roberto Carlos and before even Carlos Alberto in 1970. Now they're looking for the fullbacks because they've got a more attacking balance to their midfield. They're looking for the fullbacks to hang back a little bit more, to be able to create from deep. So perhaps, I don't quite know who's going to be the fullbacks long term for Brazil. Perhaps.
This one from Chris in Spennymoor for both of you, or either of you. My team, Tokyo Verdy, have signed Walmerson from Colorado AC, who is a forward. Does Tim or Johnny know anything about him?
No, but as mentioned before, they have an English coach, so hopefully you got trust Gary Wyatt, and he's got a good scouting network, so it could be the Sultan promotion back to the top division. You mentioned English coach, and I did want to ask one question, and it certainly slipped my mind off the back of the conversation about Marcelo Bielsa. What's the one thing, I mean, you can answer this in terms of a foreign coach coaching in the UK or in the English leagues, if you prefer, or you can talk about a foreign coach coming to either of your regions. What's the one thing that a coach coming from another country, the first thing, the a priori thing that they have to sort of get used to in any specific league that you want to mention? It might be different from one league to another. For example, earlier on you mentioned, Johnny, that if some of the Chinese players, when we were asking what level would they be at in the English leagues, you were saying that they might find the speed of the English leagues a little bit of a challenge. What is the one thing in either any of your leagues or in the English league, if we're talking about a foreign coach coming over here, that they need to learn? I don't know, Tim, could you go with that one first? Do you mind?
Well, yeah, I will, because I saw Carlos Queiroz potentially the future Colombia coach, currently with Iran, I saw him give a lecture to Brazilian coaches on this very subject. And he said that the most important thing, you've got to know the culture of the players that are under your command. And he gave the example. Queiroz is, although he's Portuguese, he's actually born in Africa. I can't remember if it's Angola. Yeah, and he said,
Mozambique, I think.
you will, it's one or the other. He said that you will have African players who last year they went home for a few days. They asked for a few days off because their mother died, and then they will come to you a year later and say, "I've got to go home. My mother's died." And you say, "Well, hang on a minute. He's got two mothers. He's got more. You know, the African village system has more than collective. So the concept of motherhood isn't just restricted to his birth mother. There's more there. And if you don't understand that, you think he's pulling a fast one. You think he's taking the mick. So the most important thing is to learn the culture and don't try and impose. All right, you're coming in from abroad, so you've got something extra to give. But remember that you've got to do that in their context. So you have to understand the minds of the people and the culture of the football that you're going to in order to be able to bring your extra to the basic.
Johnny?
Well, I think occasionally if I talk to coaches who come out to Asia, I think the very first thing that I think is really important is you've got to have your own coaching staff. You've got to bring your own with you. Otherwise, you're opening yourself up for problems down the line. And a lot of issues that foreign coaches have in Asia, especially Southeast Asia and the West, is they come by themselves and they have problems with their assistants or the team managers. Of course, I mean, it can be a cultural thing, but often the assistant doesn't want them there. And then you get plotting behind the backs or maybe he's not helping you as much as in the way that you think he's helping you. So you definitely need as many people around you who are part of your staff. And that really, if you don't have that, then I think you're always going to have problems sooner or later. And of course, it helps you settle in too. It helps you adapt to local culture. But if you're alone and if something and if the local staff are not very happy with you, it makes it very, very difficult.
And of course, this is not unique just to football. Whatever, I imagine, any employment that you go into overseas, you have to sort of, and journalism, I've learned that when I went to live in the United States, in Los Angeles, they do it a different way. I'm not going to go into it now, maybe another time. Stuart in Paisley says, I wanted to ask Johnny why he thinks the Australian A-League has not grown and had the same impact as, say, the MLS.
It's a good question. I think the A-League started maybe 2005. I think the salary cap maybe has something to do with it. I mean, clubs have to operate within financial constraints. It's about around $2 million a season, I think, roughly. Although they can sign some players outside that, marquee players, I think, pay more. And this makes it difficult for them to sign, more big name players that maybe go to MLS. The marketplace is very, very competitive in Australia. Of course, it is in the US, but football is one of four big sports, and you've got Aussie rules, which is huge, and cricket and rugby, which perhaps have more support in the mainstream media as well. Expansion of the original 8 teams has gone to 10. Hasn't gone. I mean, there's clubs that have folded. It hasn't quite gone so well, but there's 2 new teams coming, I think, the season after next, and that's very, very important. But it takes time. It's only 10, 12, 13 years old. I think it has stagnated a little bit, but that's partly because of not enough teams, and more teams should help. But it's certainly a long process. And but I think the salary cap does make it difficult.
Lewis has got a question for you.
What do you think, Johnny? What do you think, Johnny, about the ethnic issue with Australia? Because I know the history of football in Australia. A lot of the clubs, this is pre-A-League, they were ethnic clubs. I remember South Melbourne coming over here for that World Club Cup that Man United played at the start of 2000. And they were actually a Greek club. And lots of the clubs were of certain ethnicities. There were Croatian clubs and Italian clubs and Hungarian clubs. And the A-League didn't want that. Do you think that was a mistake? Do you think that they cut there what could have been one of the most important building blocks?
Yeah, I think, and this is always a matter of debate in Australia. As you mentioned, a lot of the old clubs, the national soccer league clubs, came from the ethnic communities, and that league folded. It went bankrupt in, I think, 2004, and it seemed to me that because from a business point of view, it didn't go so well. The new A-League, the thinking behind the new A-League, well, you say, well, we need to get rid of all of that because the league failed, and so the ethnic clubs, are not welcome, and a bit more get new, more sanitized teams. And the Football Federation that still runs the A-League and the clubs, has been actively pushing against that, and maybe some of it could have been kept to this kind of grassroots energy that does exist. Maybe they need perhaps some more of that in the A-League. I mean, that is, as mentioned, a little bit of a sanitized version of the old league. And just because the old league failed doesn't mean that it was all bad.
Yeah, Tim, Lewis has got a question for you. The Bundesliga season got back underway this evening with Hoffenheim versus Bayern. Up front for Hoffenheim is the Brazilian Joe Linton. It sounds like Joe Linton Kwesi Johnson, we should call him. But nevertheless, Joe Linton, who's been a revelation after spending 2 years on loan at Rapid Wien. He's been asked about the chance of him playing for the Seleção in the near future, and in Bundesliga circles he's very highly rated, and he didn't play much at senior level in Brazil and plays in a league that I assume isn't hugely followed in Brazil. How is he viewed back home, and could he be in the national team soon?
I think it's an excellent question. I don't think he's viewed enough. And he played for Sport of Recife in the northeast. As he said, he didn't play very much. I saw him only once. And he came off the bench. And when he came on, I thought, well, who's this gangling so-and-so? But he was great. He was terrific. He was, as well as physical, he had good technique as well. So it hasn't surprised me at all. Firstly, what a wonderful piece of scouting to pick him up on very little experience. And it hasn't surprised me at all. And it's a question, I did a TV thing with the Brazilian coach a while back. And unfortunately, I didn't have time to ask this question because I really wanted to ask him, Joelinton, does he have a chance with the national team? Centre forward is a problem. Surely you need someone, at least as an option on the bench, with physical presence in the penalty area. There aren't that many candidates around. Maybe William José of Sociedad, who's in a rich vein of form. But if I was Brazil's coach, and that's a very presumptuous thing to say, I would be very inclined to be observing him and having a look at him.
And Johnny, Callum, who's 22 years old, in Dundee, apologises in advance, but apparently his tiredness and his 18-month-old toddler have got the better of him tonight. So that's the reason why he's not phoning directly. He apologises. He isn't even able to stay up and listen. Do you accept his apologies?
Of course.
Okay, then.
With young kids, you do what you have to do.
Yeah. Okay, let's
move on. The podcast
on.
is always there, isn't it?
Oh, yeah, it is. Oh, then I'm going to have to ask the question now that you mentioned that. At the time of sending, I'm unsure who the guest panellists will be, but my question is from Mr. Durden regarding the arrival of the ex-Bristol City and England youth player J. Emmanuel Thomas at top flight Thai club PPT Rayong. This was a move that surprised a lot of people, including myself, and got me wondering about what kind of reception he got as one of what I can assume is a very small number of English players in that league. Was he met with great excitement or a shrug of the shoulders from the fans, media in the area? Very big fan of the show, by the way, and we'll be listening on the podcast first thing tomorrow.
Well, the answer is I don't really know, to be honest. It's not the biggest of Thai teams, and it's true you don't get that many English players playing in Asia. Jay Boothroyd has been doing quite well in the J League, but overall they're quite rare. But I think Thai football is improving, so very technical. So hopefully he can improve as a player too. But I don't really know what kind of reception. Thai fans are very welcoming and generous, so I'm sure it'll be quite positive.
And they're not allowed to advertise for gambling clubs in Thailand, am I right? On their football shirts?
Probably not. Yeah, I don't know. It's not the kind of thing that would go down well, I think. Yes, I've never seen it.
Why is that? Why would that be? Out of interest, why would they? Because I imagine, I always get the impression that Asia is a very big continent for gambling on football. Is what the impression I get in any case.
Right. Well, it is, and that's partly why it's not allowed. I mean, in China too, the Chinese, the risk of generalization, are well known for their absolute love of gambling, which is why the government don't allow it so much. They do it kind of on foreign websites and things like this. You want to bet in China officially, there's government lotteries and things like that, but everyone knows the odds on those things are not great. Same in South Korea. I mean, my wife used to work part time at one of the things, 2 race courses in South Korea, The Koreans love betting, but the maximum bet was only about £50, £60 a race. So because otherwise they go crazy. So what people in Korea used to do, used to pay little kids, well, younger kids, to put on bets for them so they could bet more. So I think it's because Asians love betting so much that the government's trying not to encourage it and tend to clamp down as much as possible.
Tim,
also in Thailand, please.
No, go on. Also in Thailand.
I went to a match in Bangkok, a team called Bangkok Glass, and they, on a bit of a tangent, they were trying, I think it's got relegated, but 2-3 years ago they were trying to challenge for the title. And their idea to get more fans to come to games was to pay attractive female fans to stand in the stadiums and at the same time sign good-looking players, and more female fans will come, and then because of that, more male fans will come.
That always works. That always works. I'm not sure it doesn't work.
It's a great transfer policy.
It worked in the nightclubs I used to go to. Anyway, but Tim, did you see what I did there?
What did you do?
Well,
boast about it, whatever it is. Have a boast.
I will have a boast. What I did was get Johnny to answer the question before I pose the question. So here's the question from Tom in Thailand. Happy New Year to Tim and Johnny and everybody else behind the scenes. I have a question about gambling. The shirts of teams in the Premier League and Championship. Hey, now you see, don't you? You've got to listen and learn, Tim. I might catch you out one of these days. Anyway, I have a question about gambling. The shirts of teams in the Premier League and Championship are splattered with gambling logos at HT in TV games. Cockney actors, half-time, I get it. In TV games, Cockney actors encourage viewers to bet. This is supposedly having an adverse effect on Brits, especially young men. I don't know about that, but yeah, you could assume that. In Thailand, where I live, gambling is officially, quote-unquote, illegal, and therefore no such advertising. What is it like in South America, Tim, and the rest of Asia, Johnny? Well, Johnny's told us. Tim, what effect has any of this had on society where you are?
It's just beginning to come in. It's legally something of a grey area, but these international betting sites are coming in. I suspect that in a few years' time, the South American clubs will be full of betting sponsors rather than banks or mobile phone companies. They'll be sponsored by betting companies as well. And
Johnny, the big question is, who's going to win the Asia Cup?
I'm going with South Korea.
You're going for South Korea?
Yeah, I think they'll win.
Tim, who are you going for?
Well, who are they going to beat in the final?
Probably Iran. I think those South Korea defence is looking better. If they can start clicking a bit more in attack and the sun's there, then they haven't won since 1960. So I think this is the time.
I do love it when a pundit nails his mast to the whatever. Thank you very much, Johnny. Many thanks to him. All the best.
Thank you.